She was invisible to the city, used to surviving among alleys, cardboard, and silence. But that day, upon finding a boy in danger, she decided to act with what she had: courage and empathy. With courage and intelligence, she protected the boy, exposed a cruel plan, and confronted a society that had always ignored her. If you love great stories, please subscribe to our channel and comment where you're from. We continue. It was early November in Chicago, and the wind cut through Lily Morgan's worn jacket like it wasn't even there. At 17, she'd mastered the art of survival on the streets, a harsh education forced upon her after the system had failed her 3 years ago. The abandoned building where she'd been sleeping for the past month offered little protection from the approaching winter, but it was safer than the shelters, where her few possessions often disappeared while she slept. Lily tucked her hands into her sleeves, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid morning air. She had learned to make herself invisible to the bustling professionals who hurried past, their eyes averted, their coffees clutched in gloved hands. Sometimes, being unseen was a blessing. Other times, it was a curse that reinforced her loneliness. Today, she had exactly $7.34, enough for a warm breakfast at the diner, where Marge, the kind-hearted waitress, sometimes slipped her extra food. Lily made her way down Michigan Avenue, skirting the more crowded areas where police officers might tell her to move along. The city's gleaming skyscrapers towered above her, monuments to wealth and prosperity that seemed to belong to another world entirely. "Morning, sunshine," Marge greeted her with a smile as Lily slid into a booth near the back of the diner. "The usual?" Lily nodded, grateful for the small slice of normality. "Thanks, Marge." As she waited for her eggs and toast, Lily pulled out a dog-eared notebook from her backpack. It contained sketches of the people she observed, her small way of connecting with a world that largely ignored her existence. She had a talent for capturing expressions, for seeing beyond the masks people wore. Drawing gave her purpose, a reason to observe rather than just survive. Several miles north, in the prestigious Gold Coast neighborhood, 12-year-old Mason Reynolds stared at his breakfast without appetite. The modern penthouse apartment offered spectacular views of Lake Michigan, but lately it felt more like a beautiful prison than a home. "Mason, honey, aren't you hungry?" Rebecca Reynolds asked, her perfectly manicured hand reaching across the marble countertop to touch his. His stepmother's smile didn't quite reach her eyes, a detail Mason had begun to notice more and more since she'd married his father 18 months ago. "Not really," he replied, pushing away the untouched plate of French toast. "You need to eat something before school," she insisted, her voice taking on that artificial sweetness that made Mason's skin crawl. "Big test today, right?" Mason nodded, though there was no test. Rebecca never really paid attention to his school schedule. She just pretended to care when his father was around. "Where's Dad?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Boston. The Harrison merger, remember? He'll be back tomorrow evening." Richard Reynolds, technology mogul and founder of Reynolds Innovations, was always somewhere else, Boston, Tokyo, London, expanding his empire while Mason's world seemed to shrink. Since his mother's passing 4 years ago, Mason had watched his father bury himself in work, then rush into a relationship with Rebecca, his former executive assistant. The wedding had happened so quickly that Mason barely had time to process it. "I have a meeting with investors this afternoon," Rebecca said, checking her watch. "Mrs. Garcia will pick you up from school." Mrs. Garcia was their housekeeper, a kind woman who had been with the family since before Mason was born. She was one of the few constants in his life, a connection to happier times. "Actually," Rebecca continued, tapping at her phone, "there's been a change of plans. Mrs. Garcia needs to take my designer dress for alterations before the charity gala. You know the way home from school, right? It's only 6 blocks and you're a big boy now." Mason felt a flicker of unease. "Dad never lets me walk home alone." Rebecca's expression hardened momentarily before softening into a smile. "Your father is overprotective. All the other kids your age walk home themselves. Besides, it's broad daylight in one of the safest neighborhoods in Chicago." Before Mason could protest further, Rebecca's phone chimed. She glanced at it, and something changed in her demeanor. a slight tension around her mouth, a sudden alertness in her eyes. "I need to take this," she said, stepping away from the kitchen counter. "Finish your breakfast and don't miss the bus." Mason watched as she disappeared into her home office, her voice dropping to a whisper as she closed the door. Lately, she'd been taking a lot of private calls, looking over her shoulder as if afraid of being overheard. Once he'd caught her quickly, ending a call when his father unexpectedly came home early. Something didn't feel right, but Mason couldn't put his finger on what it was. His father brushed off his concerns, attributing them to normal adjustment difficulties. "Give her a chance, buddy," he'd say. "She loves us both." Mason wasn't so sure about that. At school, Mason went through the motions, his mind preoccupied with the unusual request to walk home alone. When the final bell rang, he stood hesitantly at the school entrance, watching as other students were greeted by parents or caregivers. "Everything okay, Mason?" Ms. Parker, his English teacher, asked as she noticed him lingering. "Yeah, I'm just walking home today," he replied, trying to sound casual. Ms. Parker frowned. "That's new, isn't it? Does your father know?" "It's fine. Rebecca said it's okay." He shouldered his backpack. "See you tomorrow, Miss Parker." The first few blocks were uneventful. Mason even began to enjoy the sense of independence, the feeling of being trusted to do something on his own for once. But as he turned onto a less busy street, a shortcut he knew would save him a few minutes, an unfamiliar sensation crept up his spine, the feeling of being watched. He quickened his pace, his heart racing as he heard footsteps behind him. When he glanced back, he saw a man in a dark jacket, sunglasses obscuring his face, keeping pace with him about half a block back. Probably nothing, Mason told himself. Just another person walking home. Then the man spoke into a phone, his eyes never leaving Mason. "I have visual on the target. Moving to secure now." Mason's blood ran cold. Target? Was the man talking about him? The stranger quickened his pace. Mason broke into a run, panic surging through him. He darted down an alley, hoping to lose his pursuer. Behind him, he could hear the man's footsteps, faster now, closing the distance. Mason's mind raced along with his feet. This wasn't random. This was planned. And somehow he knew Rebecca was involved. He needed to hide, to find help. But in this moment, caught between his privileged world and the unknown dangers of the city streets, Mason Reynolds had never felt more alone or more afraid. Mason's lungs burned as he sprinted through the unfamiliar streets of Lower Wacker Drive, an area his father had explicitly warned him to avoid. The underground roadway was dimly lit and eerily quiet compared to the bustling city above. Mason had ducked down a service stairwell in desperation, hoping to lose his pursuer. He heard footsteps echoing behind him, gaining ground. "Kid, stop running!" The man's voice bounced off the concrete walls, amplifying his command. In a split-second decision that would change everything, Mason veered sharply into a narrow gap between two support columns. The space opened into a forgotten maintenance area, cluttered with construction materials and debris. Disoriented and terrified, he crawled behind a stack of plywood sheets, making himself as small as possible. Mason's phone vibrated in his pocket. A text from Rebecca. "Where are you? Mrs. Garcia says you haven't arrived home yet." The duplicity of the message made his stomach churn. Why would she ask where he was when she'd arranged for him to be followed, unless she expected him to already be caught by now? With trembling fingers, he silenced the phone and shoved it deep into his backpack. Minutes stretched like hours as Mason huddled in his hiding place, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. Eventually, the footsteps faded. Had the man given up? Or was he waiting, knowing Mason had to come out eventually? As daylight waned, the temperature dropped. Mason's thin school jacket offered little protection against the November chill. Hunger gnawed at his stomach. He'd been too nervous to eat lunch, and now he regretted it. He needed to find help, but who could he trust? Not Rebecca, certainly, not the police who would just take him home, and his father was unreachable in Boston. A sudden noise made him freeze. Someone was moving among the debris just a few feet away. Mason held his breath, pressing himself deeper into the shadows. "I know you're there," a female voice said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." Mason remained silent, heart hammering in his chest. "Look, I don't care what you're running from, but it's going to get real cold down here tonight." "Like dangerous cold." The voice was young but carried a weariness that suggested old pain. "I've got a safer place. Food, too, if you're hungry." Hunger and desperation finally outweighed fear. Mason shifted slightly, peering around the edge of the plywood. In the dim light, he made out the silhouette of a girl, maybe a few years older than him. Her clothes were worn, her frame slight, but she stood with a quiet confidence that somehow made Mason trust her. "How did you find me?" he whispered. The girl shrugged. "I know all the hiding spots down here. It's kind of my territory." She extended a hand. "I'm Lily." "Mason." He hesitated before taking her hand, which was surprisingly warm despite the cold. "We should move," Lily said, glancing nervously toward the entrance. "That guy in the leather jacket came through twice. He's gone now, but he might come back with friends." The mention of the man sent a fresh wave of fear through Mason. "You saw him?" "Hard to miss. He wasn't exactly being subtle." Lily tugged gently on his arm. "Come on. My spot's not far, and no one ever looks there." Having no better options, Mason followed Lily through a maze of service corridors and abandoned spaces that existed beneath Chicago's polished surface. She moved with the confidence of someone navigating their own home, occasionally stopping to listen or check around corners. "You do this a lot?" Mason asked after they'd been walking for what felt like 20 minutes. "Do what?" "Help random kids hiding from scary guys." Lily gave him a sideways glance. "First time, actually. Usually I mind my own business, but—" She trailed off, then shrugged. "You reminded me of someone." They emerged into a different section of the underground, one that smelled of dampness and disuse. Lily led him to what had once been a storage room for maintenance equipment. She'd transformed it into a makeshift living space, a sleeping bag laid out on a foam pad, a milk crate serving as both table and chair, a battery-powered lantern providing warm light. "It's not much," she said, suddenly self-conscious as she watched Mason take in her humble dwelling. "It's amazing," he replied honestly, impressed by her resourcefulness. "How long have you lived here?" "This spot about 3 weeks. I move around." Lily pulled a backpack from behind some pipes and rummaged through it. "Here." She handed him a slightly squashed sandwich wrapped in napkins. "It's from the diner, where I sometimes help out. The owner gives me leftovers." Mason unwrapped the sandwich, turkey and cheese, and took a grateful bite. It was the best thing he'd ever tasted. "So," Lily said, as she sat cross-legged on her sleeping bag, "want to tell me why some creepy guy is chasing a kid who obviously comes from money?" She nodded at his expensive sneakers and designer backpack. Mason hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. But there was something about Lily, a directness, an absence of judgment, that made him feel he could trust her. "I think my stepmother set me up," he said finally. "She made me walk home alone today, which never happens. And she's been acting weird. Secret phone calls, lying to my dad." Lily's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened with interest. "Your dad doesn't—" "No, you're missing. He's in Boston on business. He's not back until tomorrow night." Mason's voice cracked slightly. "Rebecca, my stepmother, she married my dad last year. I never trusted her, but lately it's been worse. I think she might be trying to get rid of me." The words sounded melodramatic, even to his own ears, but Lily didn't laugh or dismiss him. Instead, she nodded slowly, as if what he was saying made perfect sense. "Rich lady marries rich guy with a kid. Kid gets in the way of her plans." Lily's matter-of-fact tone made the scenario sound plausible, even obvious. Classic evil stepmother stuff. "But why would that guy be following me? Why today?" Lily considered this. "Does your dad have a lot of money? Like a lot? Mason nodded. "He owns Reynolds Innovations. They make security software." Lily let out a low whistle. "So we're talking serious cash. And if something happened to you—" My dad would pay anything to get me back, Mason finished, the reality of his situation hitting him with full force. You think she's trying to kidnap me? Or make it look like someone else did, Lily suggested. Either way, you can't go home. You can't go to the police, not yet, not without proof. But my dad Sowerton will believe his wife over a kid with an overactive imagination. Lily's voice held the weight of personal experience. Adults always stick together. We need evidence. Mason's phone vibrated again. Multiple texts from Rebecca, each more frantic than the last, culminating in, "Police have been notified. Please come home now." "She's reported me missing," Mason said, showing Lily the screen. "Perfect," Lily replied with a grim smile. "Now she looks like the concerned parent." "What do we do?" Lily was quiet for a moment, thinking. "First, we turn off your phone. They can track it." She waited while Mason powered down the device. "Second, we need to figure out what your stepmom's real plan is and who that guy was." "How do we do that?" "I know someone who might be able to help, a journalist who does stories about corruption and stuff. She gave me her card once when she was doing a piece on homeless youth." Lily reached into her backpack and pulled out a battered wallet, extracting a creased business card. "Olivia Taylor, Chicago Tribune." "You think she'll believe us?" "Honestly? Probably not at first, but she's fair and she knows how to dig for the truth." Lily tucked the card back into her wallet. "We'll go see her tomorrow. For now you should get some sleep." Mason glanced at the single sleeping bag. "Where will you sleep?" Lily gave him a half smile. "I've got a spare blanket. I'll be fine on the floor." "No, I'll take the floor." Mason insisted. "It's your home." After some back and forth, they compromised by sharing the sleeping bag as a blanket, while both laying on the foam pad. It was far from comfortable, but Mason was too exhausted to care. As he drifted toward sleep, Mason found himself wondering about the girl beside him. "Lily, how did you end up here? Don't you have family looking for you?" In the dim light of the lantern, Lily's face remained carefully neutral. "That's a story for another day. Get some rest, rich boy. Tomorrow's gonna be complicated." Mason wanted to ask more questions, but fatigue overcame his curiosity. His last thought before sleep claimed him was that this strange underground room with a homeless girl he'd just met somehow felt safer than the luxury penthouse he'd left behind. Above them, the city of Chicago continued its relentless pace, oblivious to the drama unfolding beneath its streets. News reports of a missing 12-year-old son of a prominent businessman began to circulate. Police mobilized, statements were issued, and a distraught stepmother pleaded for information on her beloved stepson's whereabouts. Meanwhile, the man in the leather jacket made a call from his car. "We have a problem," he said tersely. "The kid got away. I lost him somewhere around Lower Wacker." The voice that responded was tightly controlled but furious. "Find him. The plan is already in motion, and if that boy talks to the wrong person, we're all finished." Richard Reynolds paced the length of his Boston hotel suite, phone pressed to his ear, his normally composed demeanor cracking with each passing hour. The evening news played silently on the television, his son's school photo prominently displayed. Alongside the headline, "Tech mogul's son missing." "What do you mean there's no sign of him?" Richard demanded. "It's been 24 hours, Detective Morris. My 12-year-old son doesn't just vanish into thin air." "We're pursuing all leads." "Mr. Reynolds," the detective replied, his voice professionally measured. "The department has this as our highest priority. Every patrol officer in the city has Mason's photo." "I'm taking the next flight to Chicago," Richard said, already packing his briefcase with one hand. "And I want answers when I land." After ending the call, Richard sank onto the edge of the bed, head in his hands. How had this happened? Mason had never disappeared before, never even hinted at running away. The last time they'd spoken, just yesterday morning before school, everything had seemed normal. His phone rang. Rebecca. "Any news?" he asked immediately. "Nothing," she replied, her voice trembling. "Richard, I'm so sorry. If I'd known he was upset about something." "This isn't your fault," Richard reassured her automatically, though a small voice in the back of his mind whispered otherwise. Why had she let Mason walk home alone? It went against everything they'd agreed upon regarding his safety. The police were just here again, Rebecca continued. They're searching his room, his computer, like he's a criminal instead of a victim. Standard procedure, Richard said, though the thought of strangers pawing through his son's belongings made him uneasy. What about his friends? Has anyone heard from him? Nothing. It's like he just disappeared. Richard ended the call with promises to be home soon, then immediately dialed his private security firm. Mason's safety protocols included a tracking app on his phone, but it had gone offline shortly after he was reported missing. Richard authorized his security team to access all of Mason's accounts, email, social media, gaming platforms, anything. That might provide a clue. As his jet soared back toward Chicago, Richard couldn't shake the feeling that something about this situation wasn't adding up. Mason was street-smart and cautious, traits Richard had deliberately instilled in him. He wouldn't go with a stranger willingly, which meant either force was involved or Mason was running from something. But what could make his son run instead of coming home? Morning light filtered through a small, grimy window near the ceiling of Lily's underground sanctuary. Mason woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where he was until the events of the previous day came rushing back. He sat up, wincing at the stiffness in his back from sleeping on the hard floor. Lily was already awake, sorting through her backpack. She'd changed into a clean, though equally worn, t-shirt and had tied her hair back with a frayed elastic band. "Morning, rich boy," she said without looking up. "Sleep okay?" Mason rubbed his eyes. "Not really." "You? Used to it." She tossed him a granola bar. "Breakfast, we need to move soon." As Mason unwrapped the bar, he noticed Lily had arranged several items on her milk crate table. A small prepaid phone, some cash, a city map with markings, and a folded newspaper. "You're on the front page," she said, pushing the newspaper toward him. Mason stared at his own face, looking back at him from the Chicago Tribune. The headline read, "Missing son of tech innovator disappears without a trace." The article described how Mason had failed to return home from school, triggering a city-wide search. It quoted Detective James Morris promising that the police were exploring all possibilities, and Rebecca expressing her devastation and fear for her stepson's safety. "They're making it sound like I was kidnapped," Mason said, his stomach churning. "Exactly what she wants people to think," Lily replied. "Look at this quote from your stepmom. Mason is a wonderful boy who means the world to me and his father. Whoever has taken him, please, we just want him home safely." Mason felt sick. She's playing the grieving mother while she's the one who set me up. "We need proof," Lily reminded him, "which means we need to see my journalist contact." "Won't they be looking for me everywhere? My face is in the newspaper." Lily rummaged in her backpack and pulled out a baseball cap and a pair of oversized glasses with clear lenses. Basic disguise. Plus, most people don't really look at each other in this city. Keep your head down, walk with purpose, and follow my lead. Before leaving their underground hideout, Lily carefully repacked her few possessions. "Can't leave anything important," she explained. "Never know if you'll be able to come back." The casual way she said it, as if sudden displacement was simply a fact of life, made Mason realize how little he understood about her world. They emerged onto the street several blocks from where Mason had first encountered the man in the leather jacket. The city was already in full morning bustle, commuters hurrying past with coffee cups and phone screens demanding their attention. "Stay close," Lily instructed, leading them through a series of side streets and alleys. She moved with the confidence of someone who had mapped every possible route through the city, always aware of where cameras might be watching or where police typically patrolled. Mason had never navigated Chicago this way, at street level, blending into crowds, noticing the rhythms and patterns of urban life. In his father's world, the city was experienced from high-rise windows or the back seats of chauffeur-driven cars. "There," Lily said eventually, pointing to a modern glass building a few blocks ahead. "Chicago Tribune offices. Olivia should be there unless she's out on assignment." As they approached the building, Mason felt increasingly exposed. What if she doesn't believe us? Then we try something else, Lily said, with the pragmatism of someone accustomed to having plans fall through. But first we need to make sure she'll actually see us. She led Mason to a coffee shop across from the Tribune building. Wait here, she instructed, placing him at a table with a clear view of the entrance. Don't talk to anyone, don't take off the cap, and if anyone looks at you too long, pretend to be very interested in your phone. Where are you going? To call Olivia. We can't just walk in there. Security would stop us immediately. I need to convince her to meet us privately. Mason watched as Lily approached the counter, spoke briefly with the barista, and was directed to a phone near the restrooms. She dialed a number, spoke for several minutes, her expression shifting from earnest to frustrated to relieved. When she returned, her face was set with determination. She's coming, Lily said, sliding into the seat across from him. I didn't tell her who you are, just that I had information about a potential crime involving a wealthy family. She was skeptical, but curious enough. What if she recognizes me? That's kind of the point. Your face is everywhere. It gives our story credibility. But we need to be careful about how we present this. We can't just accuse your stepmother without evidence. 20 minutes later, a woman in her 30s with curly hair and sharp eyes entered the coffee shop. She scanned the room, her gaze passing over Mason without recognition before settling on Lily. With confident strides, she approached their table. Lily, right? She said, extending her hand. We met during my series on youth homelessness last year. Lily nodded, shaking the woman's hand. Thanks for coming, Miss Taylor. Olivia, please. She sat down, her focus still on Lily. You mentioned information about a crime? Her tone was polite but skeptical. Lily glanced at Mason, giving him a slight nod. Slowly, Mason removed his cap and glasses. I'm Mason Reynolds, he said quietly, and I think my stepmother is trying to kidnap me. Olivia's professional composure slipped for just a moment, her eyes widening in shock. She quickly glanced around the coffee shop to ensure no one had noticed, then leaned in, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Do you have any idea how many people are looking for you right now? Your father has offered a $100,000 reward for information. Your face is on every news channel. I know, Mason said, but I can't go home. Not yet. Olivia studied him carefully, journalist instincts clearly battling with civic duty. Why don't you tell me exactly what happened and why you believe your stepmother is involved? For the next 15 minutes, Mason recounted everything. Rebecca's unusual request for him to walk home alone, the man who had followed him, his suspicions about her secretive behavior over the past months. Lily occasionally interjected with observations of her own, describing the man she'd seen searching for Mason and the calculated nature of the setup. Olivia took notes, her expression revealing nothing. When they finished, she sat back, tapping her pen against her notebook. That's quite a story, she said finally. But right now, it's just that, a story. You realize what you're accusing Rebecca Reynolds of, don't you? She's the wife of one of Chicago's most influential businessmen, a major philanthropist, and by all accounts a devoted stepmother. By her accounts, Lily corrected. Look, we know how this sounds, but Mason didn't imagine being followed, and I saw that guy myself. Something's happening here, and no one is going to believe a 12-year-old kid and a homeless girl without help. Olivia's gaze shifted between them, assessing. What exactly are you asking me to do? Help us get proof, Mason said. My dad gets back tonight. If we can show him evidence that Rebecca is behind this, he'll believe me. And if I refuse, if I call the police right now? Then you lose an exclusive on what could be the biggest story of the year, Lily said boldly. Rich socialite plots against stepson for husband's fortune? That's front-page material. A smile flickered across Olivia's face. You've got good instincts, kid. She closed her notebook and leaned forward. I'm not promising anything, but I have some contacts who might be able to help us trace phone records, check Rebecca's recent activities. If there's something suspicious, we might find it. Relief washed over Mason. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Olivia cautioned. This is dangerous territory. If your stepmother really is planning something illegal, she won't be working alone. The man who followed you is still out there, and now others are looking too. We need a safe place, Lily said. Somewhere to wait while you do your digging. Olivia thought for a moment. I have a friend who owns a bookstore in Pilsen. The apartment above it is vacant right now. It's not fancy, but it's secure and off the grid. I can take you there. As they prepared to leave, Olivia's phone buzzed with a news alert. Her expression turned grave as she read the screen. What is it? Mason asked. Your father, she said, showing them the notification. He's offering $1 million reward now, and he's holding a press conference in 2 hours. He's really worried, Mason said, guilt washing over him. We need to move. Fast, Olivia decided. The higher the stakes get, the more dangerous this becomes for all of us. As they left the coffee shop, none of them noticed the man sitting in a parked car across the street, a telephoto lens capturing their exit, his phone already dialing a familiar number. I found him, he said simply. But there's a complication. He's with a reporter. The apartment above Bookends, a charming independent bookstore in Chicago's Pilsen neighborhood, was sparsely furnished but clean. Faded posters of literary classics adorned the walls, and the air smelled of old paper and cinnamon, the latter emanating from the bakery next door. For Mason, who had spent his entire life surrounded by luxury, the modest space was both foreign and oddly comforting. The owner, Elena, is an old friend, Olivia explained as she unlocked the door. She uses this place for visiting authors sometimes. No one will look for you here. Lily immediately moved through the apartment, checking windows and exits with the practiced eye of someone who had learned to prioritize escape routes. It's good, she confirmed after completing her inspection. Second-floor windows face the alley. Fire escape looks solid. Olivia raised an eyebrow at Lily's security assessment, but made no comment. Instead, she placed her laptop on the kitchen table and connected to a portable Wi-Fi hotspot. I'm not using the building's internet, she explained. Less traceable this way. Mason sat on a worn but comfortable sofa, the events of the past 24 hours finally catching up with him. His father would be landing in Chicago soon, frantic with worry. The thought made his chest tighten with guilt. Can I at least let my dad know I'm safe? He asked. Not where I am, just that I'm okay. Olivia and Lily exchanged glances. Not yet, Olivia said gently. If Rebecca is monitoring his communications, which she would be, any contact could lead her straight to you. Your dad's press conference is starting, Lily said, pointing to Olivia's laptop screen where a news site was streaming live. The three gathered around the computer as Richard Reynolds appeared on screen, looking haggard and desperate, a stark contrast to his usual polished media presence. The sight made Mason's throat constrict. He'd never seen his father so openly vulnerable. I'm speaking directly to whoever has my son, Richard began, his voice steady, despite the emotion evident in his eyes. Mason is everything to me. Whatever you want, money, business concessions, we can negotiate. Just please let me know he's safe. Standing slightly behind Richard, Rebecca dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, the picture of a distraught stepmother. Mason felt a surge of anger at her performance. She's good, Lily muttered, really selling it. After the brief statement, reporters shouted questions. One voice rose above the others. Mr. Reynolds, police sources suggest Mason may have run away rather than been abducted. Can you comment on that possibility? A flash of confusion crossed Richard's face. Mason has no reason to run away. He's a happy, well-adjusted boy with a loving home. Actually, I do have a reason, Mason said to the screen, as if his father could hear him. Olivia's phone rang, interrupting the press conference viewing. She stepped away to take the call, speaking in hushed tones, while Mason and Lily continued watching Richard field increasingly uncomfortable questions about his family, life and recent business dealings. When Olivia returned, her expression was serious but excited. That was my contact at the phone company. He found something interesting. Multiple calls between Rebecca and a burner phone over the past 3 weeks. The burner's location during several of those calls matches perfectly with areas near your school, Mason. The guy who followed me, Mason said, pieces clicking into place. Probably, Olivia agreed. But calls aren't enough. We need content, what they discussed, any explicit mention of plans. What about her regular phone, Lily suggested. Could your contact get text messages or something? Olivia shook her head. That would cross into definitely illegal territory. But she tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the table. There. Might be another way. Mason, does Rebecca use cloud storage for her phone backups? Mason nodded. Everything in our house is connected to Reynolds Innovation security systems. Dad insists on it. Automatic backups, remote access, the works. And do you have access to these systems? Some parts. Dad gave me emergency admin credentials after my mom died. Said I should always be able to reach him if I needed. Tess? Olivia leaned forward. Those credentials might let us access Rebecca's phone backups legally, or at least in a gray area. If she's using your father's systems and you have authorized access, I'm not sure it works that way, Mason said uncertainly. Maybe not in court, but right now we're just looking for evidence to show your dad, not the police. Mason hesitated, then pulled out the phone Lily had given him. I can try logging into the family server. The admin credentials should still work. For the next hour, Mason navigated the complex security system his father had designed, with Olivia occasionally offering guidance based on her experience investigating tech companies. Lily watched over their shoulders, absorbing everything with quiet intensity. There, Mason said finally, pointing to a folder labeled RR Mobile Backup. That's Rebecca's phone. Dad has a naming system, initials, device type. Can you access it? Olivia asked. Mason entered several commands, then shook his head in frustration. It's asking for additional authentication. I only have partial access. Let me try something, Lily said, surprising them both. She took the phone, studied the authentication request, then entered a string of characters. The folder unlocked. Mason stared at her in amazement. How did you do that? Lily shrugged, a hint of color rising to her cheeks. I notice patterns. Your dad's system uses a sequential authentication method. I've seen similar things when people set up their banking passwords. It's actually not that secure if you understand the logic behind it. Olivia looked impressed. Where did you learn tech skills like that? Library computers. Free. Coding workshops. You pick things up when you have a lot of time and no money. Lily redirected their attention to the screen. Let's focus. What are we looking for? They began sifting through Rebecca's backed-up files, photos, documents, calendar, entries. Mason felt uncomfortable invading his stepmother's privacy, but reminded himself of what was at stake. Look at this, Olivia said, opening a folder of images. These are photos of your daily routine, Mason. Leaving school, walking with Mrs. Garcia, at your after-school activities. They're surveillance photos. Mason felt a chill run through him. She was planning this for a while. Wait, Lily said, pointing to a document file. What's Project Inheritance? The file contained what appeared to be notes, fragmented thoughts, and plans typed as if in a hurry. Ours trust fund accessible only after college. New will makes me guardian in event of accident. Alternate approach needed. M won't go willingly, need plausible scenario. J confirms extraction plan viable, $250K upfront, additional $750K after ransom paid. Timeline, 3 days max, any longer. Risks, complications. After recovery, sympathy factor crucial for next phase. She was planning to fake my kidnapping, Mason whispered, the reality of the situation hitting him fully. And the next phase. What does that mean? Nothing good for your dad, I'm guessing, Lily said grimly. Olivia was already copying the files to a secure drive. This is enough to take to your father, Mason. Not necessarily enough for the police yet, but Richard Reynolds will recognize his wife's writing style, her patterns of thought. There's more, Lily said, scrolling through Rebecca's calendar. Look at this entry for tomorrow. Our returns from Boston. Consolation dinner at Lake House. And there's an attached note. Jay confirms special ingredient ready. The implication hung in the air, too terrible to voice aloud. "We need to warn my dad," Mason said, panic rising in his voice. "She's going to hurt him." "We will," Olivia assured him, already packing up her equipment. "But we need to be smart about this. Rebecca has resources, connections. If she realizes we're onto her—" A sharp knock at the apartment door cut her off mid-sentence. All three froze. "Elena?" Olivia called cautiously. No response, just another knock, more insistent this time. Lily moved silently to the window, peering carefully around the edge of the curtain. Her face paled. Black SUV across the street. 2 men watching the building. "How did they find us?" Mason whispered. Olivia's expression hardened. "Someone must have followed us from the coffee shop. I was careless." The knocking turned to pounding. A male voice called through the door. "Chicago PD, open up!" "Are they really police?" Mason asked. "Maybe. Or maybe Rebecca's hired help claiming to be police," Olivia said, quickly gathering the evidence they'd collected. "Either way, we can't risk it." Lily was already moving toward the rear of the apartment. "Fire escape, now!" As the pounding at the door intensified, they slipped out the back window onto the metal fire escape. Chicago's afternoon traffic bustled below them, oblivious to the drama unfolding above. "Down to the alley," Lily instructed, leading the way with the confidence of someone who had made similar escapes before. "Stay close to the wall, move fast, but don't run unless I say so. Running attracts attention." They descended quickly, Mason's heart pounding in his chest. When they reached the ground, Lily guided them through a maze of service alleys and narrow passages between buildings. Only when they were several blocks away did she allow them to slow their pace. "My car is parked a few streets over," Olivia said, checking her phone. "If we can reach it without being spotted, I can get you to Richard's office downtown. He should be there after the press conference." "Will security let us in?" Mason asked. "They will when they see who you are," Olivia replied. "And once we're inside, Rebecca can't touch us without exposing herself." As they turned a corner, Lily suddenly grabbed Mason's arm, pulling him back. "What?" Mason began, but Lily pressed a finger to her lips, pointing ahead. The man in the leather jacket, the same one who had chased Mason the day before, was standing next to Olivia's car, speaking into a phone. Even from a distance, his posture radiated tension and purpose. "They know your vehicle," Lily whispered to Olivia. "We need another way." Olivia thought quickly. "The L train. If we can get to the station, we can be downtown in 20 minutes. Too exposed," Lily countered. "Cameras everywhere, and they'll be watching the stations." Mason felt despair washing over him. They were so close to reaching his father, to exposing Rebecca's plot. Yet now they were trapped, being hunted through the city by people who would stop at nothing to find them. Then he remembered something, a detail from his life of privilege that might now save them. "Dad's private helicopter," he said suddenly. "It's kept at the small airport in Waukegan for emergency business trips. The pilot, Mr. Chen, has known me since I was little. If we can reach him, he'll take us to Dad without asking questions." "Waukegan is at least an hour from here by car," Olivia said doubtfully. "Not by commuter rail," Lily countered, her eyes lighting up. "Metro Union Pacific North Line goes straight there, and they won't be watching those trains." Hope surged through Mason as a plan began to take shape. With Lily's street knowledge, Olivia's resources, and his own access to his father's world, they might just have a chance to reach Richard before Rebecca could implement the next phase of her plan. What none of them realized, however, was that their discovery had accelerated the timeline. In a downtown high-rise, Rebecca Reynolds was already making adjustments, her voice cold and controlled as she spoke to the man known only as Jay. "They have evidence," she said, pacing the luxury apartment. "The reporter was seen accessing files with them. We need to move to contingency plan." "The dinner isn't until tomorrow," Jay replied, his tone cautious. "Then we change the schedule," Rebecca snapped. "Richard lands in 3 hours. He'll go straight to the office. That's where we'll intercept him." "And the boy?" Rebecca's face hardened. "Find him, whatever it takes." The metro train rumbled northward along the shores of Lake Michigan, each minute carrying them further from the immediate danger, but also racing against an invisible clock. Mason sat tensely between Lily and Olivia, his baseball cap pulled low, eyes constantly scanning the other passengers. The evidence they'd gathered was secured on an encrypted drive in Olivia's pocket, their only weapon against Rebecca's carefully constructed lies. "My dad's flight lands at 5:30, Mason said, checking. The time on Lily's prepaid phone. That gives us less than 2 hours to reach Waukegan. Find Mr. Chen and fly to the Reynolds Tower downtown." "Cutting it close," Olivia murmured, her fingers tapping a restless rhythm on her knee. She'd been making calls throughout the journey, leveraging every journalistic contact she had to piece together the larger picture. "My source at O'Hare confirmed your father's flight is on schedule, but he also mentioned that Rebecca cancelled her plan to meet Richard at the airport. She's heading straight to Reynolds Tower instead." "She's changing the plan," Lily said, her voice low but tense. "Whatever she was going to do tomorrow at the lake house, she's doing it today at the office." The train slowed as it approached another suburban station. Through the windows, Mason could see police officers on the platform, one of them holding what appeared to be his school photo. His stomach twisted. "Don't look," Lily advised quietly. "Act normal. They're checking all transportation out of the city, but they're looking for a boy alone, not a family group." Olivia had styled her hair differently and added glasses, while Lily wore a borrowed jacket from the bookstore apartment that made her look less like a street kid and more like an ordinary teenager. With Mason between them, they resembled a mother and 2 children on a mundane afternoon outing, at least from a distance. The officers scanned the train cars as passengers disembarked and boarded, but their gaze passed over Mason's group without lingering. As the train pulled away from the station, all 3 released a collective breath. "That was close," Mason whispered. Olivia nodded grimly. "And it'll get closer. Rebecca has connections throughout the city, business associates, charity, boards, social circles. The longer we're out here, the more likely someone recognizes you." "Tell me about Mr. Chen," Lily said, deliberately changing the subject to something more constructive. "Will he really help us without calling your stepmom first?" Mason nodded. "With certainty. Mr. Chen was my mom's friend before he started working for Dad. After she died, he was one of the few people who still talked about her. He never liked Rebecca much. He's just really good at hiding it." The mention of his mother brought a familiar ache to Mason's chest. Catherine Reynolds had been warm and vibrant, a talented artist who balanced her husband's technological genius with creative insight. Her sudden illness 4 years ago had devastated both Mason and his father. Richard had buried himself in work, while Mason had preserved her memory through small rituals, keeping her paintbrushes arranged exactly as she'd left them, maintaining her garden on the penthouse terrace. Rebecca had tried to redecorate shortly after moving in, suggesting that a fresh start would be healing. Mason had resisted fiercely, one of the first major conflicts in their uneasy relationship. "Waukegan next stop," announced the automated train voice, pulling Mason from his memories. "Here's the plan," Olivia said, as they gathered their few belongings. "The airport is about 3 miles from the station. I'll get us a rideshare, but I'll have it drop us a block away to be safe. Mason, you'll approach Mr. Chen alone. You're the only one he knows and trusts." "What if Rebecca already contacted him?" Lily asked, ever mindful of contingencies. "She wouldn't," Mason said confidently. "She barely acknowledges the flight staff. To her, they're just services my dad pays for, not people." The train slowed as it approached Waukegan Station, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the platform. As they disembarked and moved through the small station building, Olivia kept Mason between her and Lily, their bodies providing partial shields from curious eyes. The rideshare arrived promptly, a nondescript sedan driven by a middle-aged woman, more interested in her podcast than her passengers. Following their plan, they had her drop them near a shopping plaza 1 block from the private aviation section of the airport. "You sure about this?" Lily asked as they approached the secure entrance to the private hangars. "Once we're inside, there's no easy way out if something goes wrong." Mason swallowed hard but nodded. "Mr. Chen will help us, I know it." At the security gate, Mason stepped forward alone, removing his cap. "I'm Mason Reynolds," he told the surprised guard. I need to see Mr. Chen immediately. It's an emergency. Dean Defan. Guard's eyes widened in recognition. Mr. Reynolds, everyone's looking for you, son. I know, Mason said steadily. And I'll explain everything. But right now I need to speak with Mr. Chen. It's about my father's safety. Something in Mason's tone, the urgency, the maturity beyond his years, seemed to convince the guard. He made a quick call, spoke in hushed tones, then buzzed the gate open. Hangar 3, he said, eyeing Olivia and Lily with suspicion. Who are they? They're helping me, Mason replied simply. Please, we don't have much time. The guard hesitated, then nodded. Go on, but I'm calling this in to my supervisor. They hurried through the gate, Olivia leading the way toward a large hangar with the Reynolds Innovations logo emblazoned above the doors. As they approached, a slender Asian man in a pilot's uniform emerged, his expression shifting from confusion to shock as he recognized Mason. Mason? What's happening? Your father has been... Frantic, I know, Mason interrupted. Mr. Chen, I need your help. My stepmom, she's planning something terrible. We have proof, but we need to get to my dad before she does. Mr. Chen's professional composure faltered for just a moment as he processed Mason's words. He'd known the Reynolds family for nearly a decade, had watched Mason grow up, had mourned Catherine alongside them. These people with you, he said cautiously. They're helping. You? Yes, this is Olivia Taylor from the Chicago Tribune, and this is Lily. She saved my life. Lily shifted uncomfortably under Mr. Chen's scrutiny, but met his gaze directly. After a long moment, the pilot nodded. The helicopter is fueled and... ready. Your father asked me to keep it prepared in case it was needed for the search. His voice softened. He's been moving heaven and earth to find you, Mason. Relief washed over Mason. Then let's go. We need to reach him before Rebecca does. As Mr. Chen led them toward the sleek black helicopter at the far end of the hangar, Olivia's phone chimed with an incoming message. Her face paled as she read it. What is it? Mason asked, dread pooling in his stomach. My contact at Reynolds Tower, Olivia said, her voice tight. Rebecca arrived 10 minutes ago with 2 security consultants no one recognizes. They've restricted access to the executive floor. Mr. Chen quickened his pace. We can be downtown in 15 minutes. Get in. For Lily, who had never been in any aircraft, much less a private helicopter, the experience would have been thrilling under different circumstances. As it was, she gripped the edge of her seat tightly as they lifted off, the ground falling away beneath them. You okay? Mason asked, noticing her white-knuckled grip. Lily managed a tight smile. Just discovering I'm not a fan of flying. The helicopter banked smoothly, turning south toward Chicago's distinctive skyline. From this height, the city looked like an intricate model, orderly, contained, manageable. If only the human drama unfolding within it were as simple to navigate. Mr. Chen, Olivia called over the headset communication system, can you contact Richard directly? Let him know we're coming. The pilot shook his head. Communications to his private line are being redirected to Ms. Reynolds' assistant. Highly unusual protocol. She's isolating him, Mason realized, making sure no warnings get through. Then we go in fast, Mr. Chen decided, increasing their speed. I can land on the Reynolds Tower helipad. Security knows me, they'll let us through. Unless Rebecca changed the protocols, Lily pointed out, practical even in her discomfort. Reynolds Tower has redundant security systems, Mason explained. Dad designed them himself after a corporate espionage attempt last year. No single person can lock down the building entirely, not even Rebecca. As the helicopter approached downtown Chicago, the gleaming spire of Reynolds Tower came into view, its distinctive blue-tinted glass reflecting the late afternoon sun. The building housed not only the headquarters of Reynolds Innovations, but also Richard's private office and research lab, his second home, as he often called it. Mr. Chen's voice came through their headsets. Reynolds Tower, this is Reynolds. One requesting emergency landing clearance. After a brief pause, a confused voice responded, Reynolds 1, we show no scheduled arrivals. Please verify authorization code. Mr. Chen glanced at Mason, who nodded and leaned toward the microphone. Authorization Reynolds Alpha 77 Catherine. The security code, incorporating his mother's name, had been established years ago for genuine emergencies. Mason had never had to use it before today. A longer pause followed then. Authorization confirmed. Proceed to helipad. Security team will meet you on arrival. As they circled the tower, preparing for landing, Mason could see figures moving. On the rooftop helipad, "That's Davis," he said, recognizing his father's head of security. "If he's there, we have a chance." The helicopter touched down smoothly, its rotors slowing as Mr. Chen powered down the engines. Before they could disembark, Davis approached with two security officers, his expression professionally neutral despite the unusual circumstances. "Mason," he said as the boy stepped onto the helipad, "your father has been worried sick." "I know. And I'm sorry, but Davis, Rebecca is planning something. Where's my dad?" "Executive floor. Ms. Reynolds is with him now." Davis's eyes narrowed slightly as he registered Olivia and Lily exiting the helicopter. "Who are they?" "They help me," Mason said simply, "and they have proof of what Rebecca's doing." Something in Davis's demeanor shifted, a subtle straightening of his posture, a new alertness in his eyes. "What kind of proof?" Olivia stepped forward. "Financial records, communications with accomplices, detailed plans. Rebecca Reynolds intended to stage Mason's kidnapping, collect ransom from his father, and then—" She hesitated, glancing at Mason. "And then get rid of my dad," Mason finished, his young voice steady despite the horrible words. "We found her plans. She called it Project Inheritance." Davis processed this for only a moment before making a decision. "Follow me. Service elevator, fewer cameras." As they hurried across the helipad toward a utilitarian door at the corner of the roof, Lily hung back slightly, overwhelmed by the rapid shift from street survival to corporate intrigue. Mason noticed and extended his hand to her. "Come on, we're in this together, remember?" Lily hesitated, then took his hand, allowing herself to be pulled forward into a world as foreign to her as her underground hideaway had been to him just 2 days ago. The service elevator descended rapidly, bypassing the building's normal security checkpoints. Davis used his override key at each prompt, his expression growing more concerned with each passing floor. "Ms. Reynolds arrived with 2 men I've never seen before," he explained tersely. "Claimed they were cybersecurity consultants here to help with the search for Mason, but they're armed. I saw the outlines under their jackets." "She's accelerated her timeline," Olivia said. "She knows we have evidence." The elevator slowed as it approached the executive floor. Davis turned to face them all. "Stay behind me. If anything happens, get back in this elevator and go straight to the lobby. My team will meet you there." The doors opened to reveal the elegantly appointed executive floor of Reynolds Innovations, all polished wood and blue glass, the company's distinctive aesthetic maintained throughout. At this hour, most of the staff had gone home, leaving the space eerily quiet. Davis led them down the main corridor toward Richard's office, moving with practiced efficiency. As they approached the glass-walled conference room adjacent to the main office, voices became audible, tense, urgent. "I don't care what protocols we have to bypass," came Richard's voice, strained with emotion. "If there's been a ransom demand, I want to know immediately." "Richard, darling, you need to calm down," Rebecca's smooth voice replied. "The police have advised against direct negotiations. These men are here to help establish secure communications channels when the kidnappers make contact." Through the glass, Mason could see his father, disheveled, exhausted, pacing the conference room like a caged animal. Rebecca stood near him, her posture perfect, her expression a masterclass in concerned devotion. 2 men in dark suits flanked the door, their stances subtly alert in a way that spoke of training beyond corporate security. Mason felt a surge of anger at the sight of Rebecca's performance, at how thoroughly she had manipulated his father's grief and fear. Without thinking, he stepped out from behind Davis, pushing through the conference room door before anyone could stop him. "Dad!" he called. Richard Reynolds froze, his face transforming from desperation to disbelief to overwhelming relief in the span of seconds. "Mason! Mason!" He crossed the room in 3 long strides, sweeping his son into a fierce embrace. "Where have you been? Are you hurt? What happened?" Over his father's shoulder, Mason saw Rebecca's perfect composure crack, shock, then calculation, then a smooth recovery as she stepped forward. "Mason, thank God you're safe," she exclaimed, reaching toward them. "Don't touch him," came Lily's voice from the doorway, where she stood flanked by Olivia and Davis. "Don't pretend anymore. We know what you did." Rebecca's eyes narrowed as she took in the unexpected group, her gaze lingering on Lily with particular venom. "I don't know what you're talking about or who you are, but this is a family matter." Richard looked up, confused, his arms still protective around Mason. "What's going on? Who are these people?" "Dad," Mason said urgently, "Rebecca set this whole thing up. She arranged for someone to grab me on the way home from school. When I ran away, she pretended to be worried while her accomplice hunted for me." "That's ridiculous," Rebecca said smoothly. "Richard, the poor boy is clearly traumatized, making up stories." "We have proof," Olivia interrupted, stepping forward and introducing herself. "Financial transfers, communication records, and most damning of all, Rebecca's own notes detailing her plans. Not just for Mason's fake kidnapping, but what she called the next phase." Richard's expression hardened as he looked from Olivia to Rebecca. "What is she talking about?" One of the men in suits moved subtly, his hand reaching inside his jacket. Davis immediately stepped forward, his own hand moving to his weapon. "Don't," Davis warned. "Security Override Prometheus is now active. This floor is locked down, and my team is on their way up." Rebecca's carefully constructed facade, finally, began to crumble, desperation replacing composure. "Richard, they're lying. This is some kind of setup." "Project Inheritance," Mason said clearly. "That's what she called it, Dad. We found the files. She was going to use the fake kidnapping to get ransom money from you, and then at the lake house tomorrow." He couldn't finish the sentence. Richard's face drained of color as he looked at his wife, truly seeing her perhaps for the first time. Rebecca. In that moment of confrontation, with her elaborate plans collapsing around her, Rebecca Reynolds made her final desperate move. Her hand darted into her designer handbag, emerging with a small pistol that she aimed not at Richard or Mason, but at Lily. "This is her fault," Rebecca hissed. "This street trash turned my stepson against me." Time seemed to slow, Davis reaching for his weapon, Richard pushing Mason behind him, Olivia shouting a warning. But it was Lily, street-smart, resourceful Lily, who reacted fastest. She dropped and rolled as Rebecca fired, the bullet shattering the glass wall behind her. In the same motion, Lily swept a heavy metal paperweight from a nearby desk and hurled it with perfect accuracy, striking Rebecca's wrist. The gun clattered to the floor as security personnel flooded the room, quickly subduing Rebecca and her accomplices. 3 weeks later, the Reynolds penthouse felt like a different place. Gone were Rebecca's cold modernist touches, the sterile white furniture, the abstract sculptures that Mason had always found vaguely threatening. In their place, warm colors had returned, along with family photographs that had been relegated to storage during Rebecca's reign. Most notably, Catherine Reynolds' paintings once again adorned the walls, their vibrant colors bringing life back to spaces that had felt institutional for too long. Mason sat at the kitchen island, textbooks spread before him as he caught up on schoolwork, missed during the tumultuous events that had upended his life. Across from him, Richard worked on his laptop, occasionally glancing up to check on his son, a new habit born of nearly losing him. The penthouse intercom buzzed. "Mr. Reynolds, your guest is here," announced the building's security desk. Richard smiled at Mason. "Right on time." The elevator doors opened to reveal Lily, looking both the same and somehow different. She wore new clothes, jeans without holes, a simple blue sweater, sturdy boots, but carried herself with the same watchful confidence that had kept her alive on Chicago streets. Her hair was trimmed neatly, though she'd refused Richard's offer of an expensive salon. opting instead for a community college's cosmetology program where students practice their skills at discounted rates. "Hey," she said simply, dropping her backpack by the door with the casualness of someone who had made this visit many times in recent weeks. "How was the meeting?" Richard asked, closing his laptop to give her his full attention, a gesture that spoke volumes about how his priorities had shifted. Lily's face brightened. "The gallery owner liked my sketches. She said they have authentic urban perspective, or something artsy like that." She made air quotes around the phrase but couldn't hide her pride. "She wants to include 3 pieces in the Emerging Artist Showcase next month." "Lily, that's fantastic," Mason exclaimed, abandoning his homework to high-five her. "It's just a small gallery in Wicker Park," she said with characteristic modesty. "Nothing fancy." "It's a start," Richard said warmly. "Catherine's first showing was in a cafe that doubled as a laundromat. She always said the art world was about persistence more than connections." The mention of Mason's mother no longer brought uncomfortable silence. Instead, it felt natural, healing, a bridge between past and future, rather, than a painful reminder of loss. In the aftermath of Rebecca's arrest, much had changed for all of them. The media had initially swarmed the story, wealthy socialite's kidnapping plot against her stepson, prevented by a homeless teenager and an investigative journalist. For a week, it seemed impossible to escape the headlines or the speculation. Richard had handled it with unexpected grace, issuing a single statement, thanking those who had helped bring his son home safely, then retreating from public view to focus on healing his family. Reynolds' innovations continued under the guidance of trusted executives, while Richard took his first extended leave in years. For Lily, the transition had been more complex. Thrust suddenly into the spotlight, she had found the attention overwhelming. After years of practiced invisibility, reporters wanted her story, how she'd ended up on the streets, how she'd survived, what she planned to do now. Celebrity offers rolled in, talk shows, book deals, reality TV appearances. She had refused them all, with a wisdom beyond her years. "I don't want to be famous for helping someone," she'd told Richard. "That should just be what people do." Instead, she had accepted Richard's offer of a scholarship fund, not as charity, which she would have rejected, but structured as payment for saving Mason, which her pride could accommodate. The arrangement provided housing, education, and a monthly stipend that gave her stability without dependency. She had chosen to finish high school through a special program for returning students with plans for art school afterward. Her talent for observation, honed by years of street survival, translated beautifully to her drawings, stark, honest portrayals of urban life that captured both struggle and resilience. "Olivia called earlier," Richard said as they moved to the living room where Mrs. Garcia had prepared dinner. "The Tribune is publishing her full investigative series on Rebecca next Sunday. She wanted to make sure we were prepared." "Are we?" Mason asked quietly. Richard considered the question. "I think so. The truth is painful, but secrets are worse." The full extent of Rebecca's plot had emerged during the investigation. Married to Richard for his wealth, she had grown impatient with the trust fund structure that would only grant her significant access to the Reynolds fortune after 20 years of marriage. Her project inheritance had been a 2-phase plan. First, orchestrate Mason's fake kidnapping to extract ransom money, then eliminate Richard through carefully administered poison that would mimic his pre-existing heart condition, leaving her as Mason's guardian and controller of the Reynolds estate until he came of age. What she hadn't counted on was Mason's resilience, Lily's intervention, or Olivia's investigative skills. The evidence they had gathered proved overwhelming, leading to multiple criminal charges that would keep Rebecca imprisoned for decades. Her accomplices had turned on her quickly, accepting plea deals in exchange for testimony. The man in the leather jacket, a former security consultant named James Mercer, revealed that the original plan had never involved harming Mason physically. He was supposed to rescue the boy after the ransom was paid, cementing Rebecca's cover story while securing her accomplice's silence with a portion of the money. Mason's escape had thrown everything into chaos, forcing Rebecca to accelerate her timeline and take increasingly desperate measures. "I still don't understand how she thought she'd get away with it," Mason said as they ate dinner, the conversation returning to a topic that he still struggled to process. "Dad's doctors would have noticed if he was poisoned, wouldn't they?" Richard sighed. The investigators found she'd been researching substances that mimic natural heart failure and are difficult to detect without specific toxicology screening. "Given my medical history, a sudden cardiac event wouldn't have raised immediate suspicions." "She really thought of everything," Lily observed quietly. "Except human connection," Richard replied. "She never understood that Mason would find allies, that people would help him without expecting payment, that his safety would matter more to strangers than her scheme." The meal continued with lighter conversation. Mason's return to school, scheduled for the following week. Lily's art showcase preparations. Richard's tentative plans to resume work part-time. It had become their new normal. 3 people from vastly different worlds, bound together by extraordinary circumstances, building something that resembled family. After dinner, they moved to the penthouse terrace, a space that Catherine Reynolds had transformed years ago into a lush garden oasis high above Chicago's streets. Richard excused himself to take a business call, leaving Mason and Lily alone among the carefully tended plants. "Sometimes I still can't believe all this," Lily admitted, gesturing at the twinkling cityscape spread before them. 3 weeks. Ago I was sleeping under Lower Wacker Drive. Mason studied her profile, illuminated by the soft garden lights. "Do you miss it? Not the being cold or hungry part, but the freedom, I guess?" Lily considered this thoughtfully. "Sometimes there's a certain simplicity to having nothing. No expectations, no schedules, no one to disappoint. But cold is still cold, and hungry is still hungry." She smiled slightly. "I definitely don't miss that part." "Dad says you can stay here as long as you want," Mason said. "The guest apartment is yours, no strings attached." "I know," Lily replied, "and I'm grateful. But I need my own space eventually. Somewhere that's mine because I earned it, not because someone gave it to me." Mason nodded, understanding this core aspect of her character, the fierce independence that had kept her alive on the streets, and would shape whatever future she built for herself. "Besides," she added with a mischievous smile, "you two need me around for a while. Rich people don't know how the real world works. Someone has to teach you." They both laughed, the sound carrying across the terrace as Richard rejoined them, bringing mugs of hot chocolate, a new evening ritual that had emerged in recent weeks. "What's so funny?" he asked, distributing the mugs. "Lily says we need her to teach us how the real world works," Mason explained. Richard smiled, no offense taken. "She's not wrong. I've learned more about resilience and genuine connection in the past 3 weeks than in years of board meetings and business deals." He settled into a chair, looking out over the city he'd conquered professionally, while nearly losing what mattered most personally. "When your mother died," he said quietly to Mason, "I thought the best way to honor her memory was to build something lasting, to grow the company, secure your future financially, create a legacy. I didn't realize I was missing the most important part of that legacy, being present, being connected." Lily shifted uncomfortably, still adjusting to these moments of emotional openness that came so naturally to the Reynolds men, yet felt foreign, to someone who had learned to guard her feelings as a survival mechanism. Sensing her discomfort, Richard changed the subject. "I had an interesting call today from the foundation director. They want to expand our youth outreach programs, focus more on teens aging out of foster care. Apparently, Lily's story inspired some renewed interest in that area." "That's cool," Lily said, genuine enthusiasm breaking through her usual reserve. "Those programs need serious overhaul. Most of them treat kids like statistics instead of people." "That's exactly what I told the director," Richard agreed, "which is why I suggested they might want to consult with someone who has first-hand experience." Lily stared at him. "You mean me? I don't know anything about running programs or whatever." "You know what would have helped you when you needed it," Richard countered. "That's knowledge worth more than an MBA when it comes to effective program design. Think about it. No pressure." The conversation drifted to other topics as the evening progressed. Eventually, Lily excused herself to return to the guest apartment on the floor below, a space that had gradually accumulated small personal touches, sketchbooks on the coffee table, a collection of used paperbacks beside the bed, a jacket tossed over a chair. After she left, Mason helped his father clear away the mugs, a comfortable silence between them. "She'll say yes to the foundation thing," Mason predicted as they finished. "She just needs to convince herself it was her idea, not yours." Richard laughed softly. "When did you get so insightful about people?" "I had a good teacher recently," Mason replied. "She showed me how to really see people, not just look at them." Later, that night, as Mason prepared for bed, he paused at his window, looking out at the city. Somewhere out there were the streets where Lily had struggled to survive, the underground hideaway where she'd sheltered him, the coffee shop where they'd met Olivia, the paths they'd traversed in fear and desperation. It seemed impossible that so much had changed in less than a month. His father was present in ways he hadn't been since before his mother's passing. Rebecca's cold influence had been excised from their home and lives, and Lily, a girl who had been invisible to society, was now indelibly part of their world, bringing with her perspectives and strengths they had never known they needed. Mason knew there were still challenges ahead. Rebecca's trial would eventually bring renewed media attention. His return to school would require navigating curious classmates and their questions. Lily's transition from street survival to structured education would have its difficulties. His father's balance between work and family would require constant vigilance. But for the first time in years, Mason felt genuinely hopeful about the future. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't and likely never would be, but because they were facing it together, with honesty and courage. In Chicago's gleaming skyline, lights began to dim as the city settled into night. But in three lives that had collided by chance and circumstance, something new continued to grow. Something built on the simple, profound truth that Lily had demonstrated through her actions on that first desperate day. That true wealth lies not in what you possess, but in the courage to protect others, even when you have nothing yourself. The next morning dawned clear and cold, a perfect Chicago autumn day. Mason woke early, energized by plans to help Lily select pieces for her upcoming gallery showing. As he entered the kitchen, he found her already there sketching at the island counter, while Richard prepared breakfast, another new routine that had emerged organically in their evolving household. "Morning," Lily greeted him, turning her sketchbook around to show him her latest work, a striking rendition of the Chicago skyline as seen from below, the perspective of someone looking up from the shadows of the street. In the foreground, barely distinguishable, were three small figures walking together toward the light. Mason studied it, understanding the symbolism without needing explanation. "It's perfect," he said simply. Richard placed plates of pancakes before them, then paused to look at Lily's drawing. His expression softened as he recognized what she had captured, not just a cityscape, but a journey. "Will this be in the showcase?" he asked. Lily nodded, a hint of color rising to her cheeks. "I'm calling it Upward. It's the last piece in the series." "What's the series called?" Mason asked around a mouthful of pancakes. Lily hesitated, then answered quietly, "Invisible, Guardian." The phrase hung in the air between them, a perfect distillation of who Lily had been and who she was becoming. A girl overlooked by society, who had found her voice and purpose through an unexpected act of protection and care. As they continued their breakfast, making plans for the day ahead, one thing became clear. Though their story had begun with danger and desperation, it had transformed into something rare and precious, a chosen family bound not by blood or obligation, but by mutual respect and genuine understanding. In a city of millions where wealth and poverty existed side by side, they had created a new narrative, one that crossed boundaries of class and circumstance to reveal a simple truth, that sometimes the greatest protectors come from the most unexpected places, and the most valuable treasures aren't kept in vaults or penthouse safes, but in the courage of those who choose to see and value others when the rest of the world looks away. Dear, Listeners, we hope you've been moved by the journey of Mason, Lily, and Richard, a story that reminds us how true wealth is measured not by possessions but by character. For more emotionally captivating narratives like this one, we've prepared a special playlist with equally compelling stories. Find it by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed this tale of unexpected guardians and second chances, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring unique stories that explore life's complexity and the connections that save us when we need them most. We can't wait to read your thoughts in the comments section below. What moment in Lily and Mason's story resonated with you the most? Your perspective matters to our storytelling community.